Well, Nikon has just announced the 35mm 1.4, and it's a non-S lens, and I'm quite excited about that. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you why. For quite some time now, mirrorless camera companies have been competing over things that are quite easy to quantify, such as sharpness, chromatic aberration, sort of distortion, that kind of stuff. And in order to do that, been putting more and more different types of elements into their lenses, but that comes with some trade-offs. I have to take you back in time so you understand this a little bit better. When the Canon 35mm 1.4 Mark I was replaced with the Mark II version, we noticed something that happened, and that was that the contrast went up, the sharpness went up, but what we lost was some of that creamy rendering. The quality of the bokeh got worse because with the increased contrast and increased sharpness, that's happening to the entire picture. So for me, what matters is the use case scenario for a lens like a 35mm 1.4. To me, this would be like a street photography lens. It would be a lens for doing portraiture where you're taking the environment into account as well. So you want to see the background, not just blow it out completely. You want that bokeh, you want it to be creamy, but you want to understand the context of the location still. You'll get that always with a 35mm lens, just the nature of that focal length. Technically, if you sort of talk technically, the 1.8 version has these ED elements in it. What happens with that is you know, the ED elements get rid of the chromatic aberration. They give you that sharper picture. Nikon 50mm 1.8D version, which is an older lens versus the 1.8G version. The G lens has more contrast, it's sharper, better flare control. The 1.8D lens would flare like crazy. You get a lot of flare coming into that, and it looked fantastic. It's lower contrast, it's not as sharp, and it has this flare pattern. Like, it looks amazing. So this is the thing, is like, what do we want from our lenses? Sometimes, yes, we want that sharp look, we want clinical and perfection. Sometimes we want something that's got a bit more character. This is why lenses like the 50mm 1.2 on Canon, the EF version, was so popular, because it had this more dreamy look. It wasn't as sharp, it wasn't as corrected, wasn't as perfect, and it gave us something more to look at. So once people started talking about Nikon releasing a 35mm lens, there was a lot of discussion as to what it was going to be. People thought it was going to be a super corrected 1.2 lens. It was going to be very expensive, massive, you know, this sort of size. And I think they're still going to make that lens, and they should do. The reason they're still going to make it is because it's the polar opposite of what this 1.4 is. They've done this 1.4 for a reason. They're pleasing both sides of the market, and I think it's the best decision possible. Go light, character-based lens, not expensive. Give us the optical imperfection that makes images look more interesting on the 1.4 range. Give us corrected 1.8 range, and give us super corrected, highly polished 1.2 range for more professional use. That so depends. The 1.4 range to me is going to be the portrait lenses. That's what they're going to be for. They're going to give you that interesting look. So what you'll see is that the 1.4 lenses might not look that impressive if you're trying to do a sort of a lab test on it. But what you see is, in the hands of photographers that are decent photographers, the pictures will have this thing about them where you say, that just looks different, it looks interesting. There's been a lot of us that have been clamoring for lenses that look like some of the older DSLR lenses. Think there's classics, right? There are classic lenses in the DSLR lineup that people want to have that kind of look and feel back from without having to go back to a DSLR. We should have all of the options, and I think Nikon is about to give us that. If you're still in the mindset of, but everyone tells us sharp is better, look at how many YouTubers are putting pro mist filters or glimmer glass onto their lenses. Like, a large chunk of them are doing it. Like Peter McKinnon's brought out his own set of these things because the lenses are overly corrected, and the point of the pro mist filters and these glimmer glass filters is to undo some of that. It's to reintroduce some of the lower contrast and softer look, and that bit of glow that you get around these highlight areas that make the rendering of these images pretty. This is what you need to get your head around, is that there's a difference between sort of ultimate sharpness and correctness and something that's being pretty. If Nikon are doing this deliberately, really, really well done, and I'm not surprised that it's Nikon that's doing it. Well done for listening to a lot of the professional portrait photographers out there that were asking for something like this. Well done. If you're doing this by mistake, then I'm potentially worried, but I still would hope that this lens will do well, and that then you'll take that as a sign to make more lenses in this style. Because if you get this right, for me personally, this is what I'm going to be buying into on the Nikon system. But that leads me on to my final point, and that is there's two ways that this can go, because there are two options in making a lens of this type. One is you can get it right, and you can be looking at it and thinking, we're going to make something that's going to be characterful and look good. The option two is that you just mess it up and you make a rubbish lens. And I really hope it's not option two, and that you're going for option one, and that you're doing this deliberately. It's not just going to be a rush job. It's something that you've put some effort into. And for all of you watching, I would say when the reviews come out, what you really want to look for is to avoid all the people that are trying to do eyelash counts and blade of grass counts. And you want to go for the portrait photographers that kind of know what they're doing, and they're looking at what's the rendering like. Do you get that sort of a little bit of glow on the highlights? Does the bokeh look really nice in the background? Is it soft enough that the skin looks good and we don't have to do tons of retouching? I'm hoping that this lens isn't going to be particularly sharp. I'm hoping it's going to be low contrast, and I hope that it's going to render a really beautiful image and have a little bit of creaminess in it. And I'm prepared to give up some of the chromatic aberration correction. I'm hoping it's going to flare nicely in the sun. I want to see that flare. If I get that from this lens, I'll be very happy. I know it's not normal to see people on YouTube talking about lenses like that and wanting them to have all of those problems, but it's what I'm looking for and waiting for it. This is what I would call better lens design for people that care about the more artistic side of photography and not the sort of lab test type of photography, if they get it right. We'll see. Take care. Bye-bye.